permaculture. Just what kind of got you into that? And for people who don't know, what is that in a nutshell?
Okay, so my health concerns about my wife's health and my children's health really kind of pushed me into gardening, into growing my own food. I don't know if you um, follow what's going on with Roundup.
Hmm.
Roundup is found in breast milk. Roundup is found in cereal, and it's screwing up reproductive capacities of everyone who eats it. And so we're at this point where the only clean food you can get is the one the kind you grow in your backyard.
Hmm.
And even then, there's precautions you need to take so that you have clean food. So my wife got cancer 10 years ago, and we were basically still newlyweds, still kind of like the honeymoon phase.
Oh wow.
And um, I don't know if you've met anyone who's had horrible things happen to their spouse.
Yeah. I mean, I've had a family member. I was a caretaker for a little while with a family member that had cancer and passed away last month. So I'm very well versed in cancer. It's an awful thing.
Yeah, yeah. So it hit me right where I was like developmental, like I was 22, you know what I mean? It's like you're still kind of, at least with our age, current time period, you still kind of find yourself at that age. And so we were just married, just trying to define what marriage meant to each other, and and it just kind of sideswiped me. And then 3 months after we did this surgery and radiation, she got another form of cancer, and I was
Oh,
like, "What's going on?" And
exactly.
and then the doctors were like really uncomfortable, wouldn't meet my eye, and then I was like, "Wait a second!" And I started doing research, and I realized they had no idea what they were talking about. They were just going off of what was written in the playbook
Hmm.
that they have, and they didn't understand the science at all, and they were just gunning for the radiation and for surgery because that's what they can do.
Hmm.
When they just talk to you, they don't feel like they're doing anything. So it's like an action that they can take, and it is really sad. There's so much unnecessary surgery and tons, and we hear it all the time on the internet about how there's unnecessary radiation. Well, I'm here to tell you, my wife had unnecessary radiation, and it caused other forms of cancer. And so that's how they keep the business going, right? They don't really cure you. Um, and so it like blew my mind. I was like, holy cow, doctors, A, don't know what they're talking about, and B, are really here to help you. And I was like, this is crazy. And, you know, I had like already read, Howard Zinn's A People's History, and I was not PayPal, pen pals with
Yeah.
Noam Chomsky. So like I knew the government was not here to grow population. I knew the government was here now to shrink population and not tell you exactly the truth
Hmm.
because our foreign policy, the CIA and all that, got all smashed together with our foreign news reporting, and then our TV because our TV became international and all this kind of stuff. So I already like knew all that kind of stuff and about how I need to rely upon myself and not the government agencies because those things are not actually there to help you. They're there to do their own agenda. And so for me, it was like, okay, I know I can't turn to you for help. Holy cow! I thought I could help. You could help me, but no, you can't. And then I started investigating organic gardening, and that also is kind of a mess. And I was like, okay, guys, where are the standards? Because I'm a musician. There's musical. There's things that you can't like. It's immutable truth, right? There's immutable truth in music, and then there's immutable truth in education. You can't force feed a kid educationally. They have to drink themselves. They have to take it in. So like it just blew my mind. It just destroyed everything. Oh, my childhood raised, listen to authority, yay! And then I was like, oh, but some people in the government are bad. Okay, well, we'll vote them out. You know what I mean? Like that whole childlike kind of thing was like smashed. And it's like, you do it, you test it, or forget about actually knowing. And then I was like, oh, my word. And so it like lit a fire under me, and my garden went from a quarter acre to 2 acres. I had that first year of garden where it all went really great, and the second year when it went awful because all the nutrients were used up and all the wildlife knew where I was. And I was like, what's going on here, you know? And I had to like study and understand the science. And then I understood that like organic is just a political term taken from kind of a hippie movement, and it's not like exactly uniform scientific, those kind, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was this like moment of like, what? And then, and then like racing as fast as I could to try to accomplish what I knew I already should have had in place.
So how long have you been doing this now, and have you noticed a difference in your health and your
Yeah,
family's
okay.
health?
So, so that all depends upon if you don't run out of money or time or, you know, all of those, or energy. But because you could have a great garden and then someone could have like an injury, or a family member gets sick and you're taking care of them and your garden will go, unless you design it the right way. So I've learned all this. So probably about 8 years ago. So when we moved out west, she got cancer. We took about a year to fight it out there. We moved in New York, and we moved out west. And it took me about a year of sorting out what I wanted to do. I was recording with musicians down in LA, writing music for TV, and I just started gardening, and then I started not leaving home, and I started teaching locally. And it basically, the garden was the first step to getting me to not be nomadic. And so I basically I just started growing food because that was the logical thing that I had to do. If I was going to be an honorable husband, an honorable father, then the thing I needed to do was grow food that was clean and I could verify that was safe. And so I started doing that, and then, like I said, I hit all these weird snags in organic because they're like, "Oh, you need inputs," and I'm like, "I need inputs," and then I'm like thinking about it, and I'm like, "Wow, this is like really a lot of money, inputs." And then, like, the more research I do, I just see some people weren't doing inputs, and I was like, "Who is this guy, Masanobu Fukuoka, doing natural farming, right?" And then trying to understand why it was working the way he was doing it, reading his stuff. Found Seth Holzer and permaculture. And then I found Jeff Lawton, this great teacher that teaches permaculture. And permaculture basically is just seeing the world through nature's eyes, using her systems and patterns to ethically provide for yourself and for the future. And when we say the future, that includes the earth and people, because without those things being happy, there's no future, right? Mm-hmm. So it's really kind of basic. They'll try to like boil it down into gardening techniques. People will try to say that it's swales or herb spirals or something like that, but it's really not that at all, because a swale might be appropriate in one place, but not another. So it's a technique, not a principle. Same thing with the herb spiral. Basically, you're studying nature, you're understanding the principles behind nature, and then you're applying them in the garden. And the cool thing is, when you start doing this, you're like, oh, I think my grandma did that. And you're like, oh, I was studying family history, or I was studying European history, or Asian history, or, you know, this islander, you know, community, and all these different pieces, the why starts to float to the surface. And you're like, oh, that's why. And as a teacher, like an educator, that's the real deal. Why is the highest level of understanding, the highest level of communication, if you can explain why. And so for me, it was like, oh. And so Jeff opened the door for me to walk through. And then ever since then, I've been writing curriculum, because I was a teacher in schools. I've been writing curriculum because all this stuff is collegiate. None of it was written for high school, middle school, or elementary school. And because most people's reading levels, 8th grade, 9th grade, that's what newspapers are written at. So don't be upset, anyone. saying what your reading level is like. It's just the way we prefer reading because it's comfortable. We're not sitting around reading calculus for fun, right? So, and that's junior year, right? For my brother, at least. Not for me. So the thing is, I created this, and then overnight people started buying the 8th grade, the middle school version, the first book I wrote, like crazy, because that's what people prefer to read it at. And I was like, okay. And so I built a course around it, an online course. And basically, I have a garden that I spend maybe 5 minutes a day on walking around and looking at. And I throw seeds everywhere, and they grow, and the birds don't eat them. There are birds everywhere. Live outside Yosemite, there's deer everywhere. I don't have fences. I instead use plants as living fences that I throw the seed right, and they grow, and then the deer eat those, and they'll go inside and eat my trees that are growing. So there's all these things I'm doing that make it easy. And I'm in a region where people don't grow gardens normally in my area. I mean, there are a few people with these like fenced in, like prison-like structures with food inside, but it's like a 5 by 10. I've got 2 acres, no fences, and my soils where it's not irrigated hit 140 Fahrenheit, 2 inches deep. So it's crazy hot. There's animals everywhere. The animals are like, "Where's the water? Where is it?" And they're like running around looking for it to destroy anything they can. We've got gopher holes like this big in the ground, but it's okay. I got tons of food. I got more. You know what? I still have squash I didn't eat from last year that sat outside the entire year because I bred them to do that, so that I don't need a refrigerator. If like, I mean, we're talking about freedom. We're talking about prepping. I realized, because I'm LDS, I'm a Latter-day Saint. I'm Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints. We believe that you need at least 3 months, if not a year or two, of food storage. Every prepper I know is like, yeah, that's awesome. And they're all buying from Emergency Essentials, which is, an LDS company. We have to get to the next level. And like, I'm doing that at my church. I'm talking to everyone in the church, everyone outside of church, doesn't matter. I want everyone there. We need living food storage. We need a soil seed bank so that it rains, food grows. Why? Because it's already invested in the soil. So what am I talking about? I'm talking about self-seeding, and I'm also talking about plants that we're training to self-seed that we can have our kids take branches of and paint the ground and paint the garden. And that's an Eric Olson thing, the painting. It's very cute, but it really works. What were you going to say?
I wanted to ask you, what do you think is the problem? Like most ordinary people, they go to the grocery store to buy their fruits and vegetables and whatnot and all their other food items. What do you think the problem is doing that, or is there a problem? Because, people talk about, and I've seen it myself, I feel like cancer is so prevalent today. We all know someone affected by it. And you hear people say, oh, it has to do a lot with the food we eat. Everything is so processed now and has all these extra additives in it. Like, what do you
Yeah,
with
what does that specifically mean? Right. So I was talking to my doctor, my naturopathic MD, he's both, which is what you want, right, about this. And he says that it's the bromides. All that food, the food preservatives are coating our thyroid glands. And they're fitting in, and they're basically intercepting the paths, and they're fitting into the spaces where T3 and T4 and other hormones are supposed to be going. Instead, we have these hormone disruptors, and what that means is, so like BPA, like that plastic that everyone's talking about, bisphenol A. There's actually, this is sad. I don't want to burst anyone's bubble, but there's a whole fleet of these. And all the ones that they're like, oh, it's not BPA. It's BPA free. It's BP something else, BPS or BPL. Or there's like tons of these, and they're plastic hardeners. And what they are is when they're cooking the oil down, the crude oil down, and it settles out into the different layers. Lowest is asphalt, naphtha is like right here, butane's like right here. BPA is just one of those layers that they're trying to get rid of. It's the same thing with fluoride. It's an industrial byproduct. Same thing with that NutraSweet. It's coal tar added like a derivative that they're just trying to get rid of. Like all these alkaline waters. Dang, go test those waters. You know, people, go actually test these things. It's all bogus. Once you discover, and this really requires you doing it yourself, because once you just do it yourself, you're gonna get so angry, and then you're gonna get over it, and you're gonna get active, which is where I'm at, where we all got to get to. Once you test these things, you realize that they're all lies. The food in the store is a blatant lie, and it's poisonous, and it's deleterious to our health, and the only thing we can do is test it ourselves so that we actually know, or just grow it yourself, because it's easy. So I literally make seed mixes. That fridge right behind me, behind this, is full of seeds, just full of seeds. I have like gallons and gallons and gallons and gallons of seeds that I grew myself and seed saved myself. And it's really just so easy. All of our ancestors did it. If you have kids, you could have all your kids do it. It's also homeschooling. It's science. It's history. It's English. It's reading. It's writing. Especially if you're writing things, keeping catalog of what you're doing. You know, then it's math. So the food in the grocery stores is almost all bogus. Cisco, almost all bogus. Everything that gets shipped in. I'm just going to go, let's run a little situation here. It's coming from Argentina. It's organic. That's great. I am a customs worker. Don't you realize that there's crazy things coming from other countries? I'm going to spray that and keep the sticker on there. So they're spraying everything that comes through customs. Anything that's open, food that passes through customs is sprayed. Because on some level, why wouldn't they? Right? I mean, like, from their perspective, I understand, right? And that's why I just don't want to swim in that pool. You know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, if it's packaged and sealed, then maybe we're talking, but they're still irradiating it. They're still microwaving it, basically. So I don't want to deal with that. And I'm not saying the food itself is carrying like radiation from like microwaves or something like that. But it's certainly not what it was, and the living enzymes or all the most of the beneficial aspects are gone. So when I discovered this about food, when I did my research, I realized that there's only a few outlets. There's local farmers markets. Go to their farm. I've gone to local farms and looked at their soils and been like, are you kidding me? How are you growing food in this? And I'm realizing, oh, they're putting nutrients in their drip line. Oh, where are those nutrients coming from? Oh, they're da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, yeah, but how do you derive that? Oh, it's a industrial process. And it's like, yeah, but what's the controls on that? What's, you know what I mean? And they have no idea. And so, again, it really comes down to like places like Azure Standard, where they're a distribution service for farms or local farms that you trust, or local gardeners that you trust, because you can barter, right? Or your own garden. And the reality is we all can do it. Our ancestors did it. Our ancestors did it and did way more. I mean, we're like, oh, I can't garden, I don't have time. And then we watch TV, we watch a movie. We don't cook from scratch. We're not building the chair we sat in. You know what I mean? We're like seriously doing nothing compared to our ancestors, and they sacrificed their lives and their free time for us to be here. So recognizing that, saying we have to do a little bit of work, like walking around every once in a while, throwing things every once in a while, pulling things off the ground every once in a while, chopping with a knife. I'll show that really quick. So this is a rice knife. That's a really useful tool. This is my #1 garden tool. When I'm setting up gardens, I use shovels. When I'm managing gardens, I use a rice knife. And the reason that is because it just grows so rampant because I'm throw sowing. So it's really dense, and it's creating all the shade and protecting the soil and mulch when I chop it. And it actually will take the soils from 120 where it's irrigated, it's watered and it only lowers it 20 degrees, which is crazy. But it will lower it to below 80 degrees with just mulch. So it's really kind of crazy that we don't think this way already, because all of us could have soil thermometers and do exactly what I did and test it. And like this all started with permaculture. You'll pick up a permaculture book and it'll say chop and drop, but it won't have a picture showing the temperature difference. And that's what I'm doing now to show people the science behind it, right? Because everyone's yard, everyone's areas are going to be different temperature-wise. But most people just, I mean, the first permaculture book came out in 1989. There were other permaculture-like books before that, but this was the real cohesive permaculture book. So it spread from there, and all these academics spread it and made it more complicated and detailed. And I'm actually bringing all that new research back into a textbook for high schoolers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Now, was it hard for you to get, start living that permaculture lifestyle, or like, what would be your advice for someone else who's also trying to live that lifestyle? Is it easy to get accustomed to, or does it take some time?
I think that, so I'm writing a book called A Permaculture Family, or The Permaculture Family, and if I called it The Permaculture Family, I would have to make it about how there is no such thing as the permaculture family, because you may have less than a quarter of an acre. I may have 100 acres or whatever. I only have, it's not even mine, it's family land. But all our answers and solutions are going to differ. So whatever is my interpretation of permaculture for my area is going to completely differ. So don't feel like the Joneses you need to keep up with, right? We need to just embrace the perspective. And this is the thing that I really harp on in my book. A lot of people talk about how the definition of permaculture is a design science based on the patterns of nature. So you can ethically provide for both people and the planet. That's awesome. I think of it as a lens now. So it's a way of seeing the world, it's a way of looking at any situation. And so I would just say start by embracing the fact that nature has all the answers already. We don't need synthetic biology, oh dear. We don't need GMOs based off of broken 70s science. I mean, look up epigenetics. You'll realize very shortly after you read the 2005 cover article of Discover why GMOs are completely ridiculous. Epigenetics are what inform our genes, not the genetic codes. So there's so much to learn. If you take a PDC, it's a very general intro to permaculture. A lot of people take that and think they know permaculture now, but it's a journey because it's nature. Mm-hmm. For instance, something that'll be included in my book, and I've not seen in any other book that I learned recently from Peter McCoy, Radical Mycology, is that lichen fixes nitrogen. And in the cold temperate climate where there's like not nitrogen fixing trees everywhere, it's lichens that fix the nitrogen for the trees in the forest. And so we don't even have that. Like, we don't have a fungal layer and the layers of the food forest. We do in my book, but if you just look at most permaculture books, it's not in any book that I've ever seen. And it's because it's an emergent science, and it's just, I mean, I only heard about permaculture 3-4 years ago, and I only took my PDC 2 years ago now, or a year and a half ago, I think. Yeah, like a year and a half ago now. But yeah, that was already after I'd read Bill Mollison's book and been studying permaculture for a bit. Getting instruction from someone else and actually seeing them apply it really makes a difference. For me, I was just reading books and watching YouTube videos, and I just finished writing a 430, well, it's not even done, I finished writing the rough draft, right? And I'm adding and editing right now. And it's 435 pages. And I would say about 200 of those pages haven't been read in permaculture yet. So, you know what I mean? My understanding was there, now it's here. I just finished, I have a 14-hour all ages permaculture course that's holistic, so it's cooking, seed saving, you know, all these different things in it. And I'm working on right now a gardening course that's just gardening for permaculture. And again, it's all about applying the principles of the natural world to what we're doing to save time, energy, money, and to get the healthiest food. And we can prove that right here. So I don't know if you guys know, but there's this handy dandy thing called a Brix meter. And this measures, it could be, some people know them as glycol readers. Some people know them as starch readers or sugar readers. And you drop the juice right here, and you can do it with honey as well. They use this with wine. And then you look at this in the sunlight, and it gives you a reading as to how much sugar is in there. So if you're doing tomatoes, that'll give you the sugar content. If you're doing, it'll tell you the ripeness of things. And it will also tell you the quality of the photosynthesis. So if I take a GMO, if I take a homegrown, and I take a farmer that grew it for the farmer's market, the farmer's market guy is going to pull it a little underripe so that it doesn't get destroyed on the way there, meaning it's not as ripe as yours. The GMO guy is going to do the same thing, except he's got to travel even further. So he's going to do two things. The GMOs are going to be bred so that they're bruise resistant. We've all heard that, right? So that they don't oxidize. They don't oxidize. That means it doesn't digest, doesn't compost. So those Arctic apples, don't digest those. So we just got to get to this point where we recognize all these. We have to honor these natural processes. We have to include them in our lives, and we can't eat things that are so clearly unnatural. Because I mean, like that whole thing about oxidizing I just said. I mean, every kid in America should understand that. And that should be just a basic principle. Like, oh, it doesn't oxidize, it doesn't compost, then why would you eat it? This thing right here, it's a compost reactor, basically, inside our bodies. That's what we're doing with our food. So, that's basically what I'm doing. I mean, like, another thing, the nitrogen cycle, the carbon cycle. People don't even understand what those things are because they weren't taught them in schools. It's like a crime, like an ongoing crime in America, and abroad too. But in America, we expect to at least have some modicum of science in our schools. All those moles, balance the mole in biology. BS. Those things aren't real. I talked to Elaine Ingham. She said, yeah, they may mathematically balance out, but in the soil, in real life, those things don't exist and don't happen. And so we're actually getting kids to practice their math skills doing pointless math activities in a science setting and not learning science. And so when kids are like, oh, I feel like I'm not learning anything real, they're right, 100%. So, I mean, I'm sure a bunch of your audience, is homeschooling. And that's awesome because they're not being taught anything in these schools. And I'm trying to fix that on my end. But I got a big uphill road. And if parents can pull their kids out and start teaching them how to be, freedom preppers at home, that's probably the most worthwhile curriculum. And that's the foundation. Living ethically and resiliently on this planet comes before all the other stuff that we have to learn in schools.
We've talked a lot about growing your own food, but permaculture also extends to growing your own meat and farming and all that. What is your take on that aspect of it?
Totally, yeah. Like I've alluded to, it's a lens. So a lot of people think it's just gardening. I'm creating a gardening course because there's actually no permaculture gardening courses. There's a lot of people who talk about their garden in their permaculture book, and a lot of the permaculture books are simply about that person's backyard, and they're not actually about permaculture so that everyone can use it. My books are designed so that they're global. They're being translated into a dozen languages. Permaculture can be applied to architecture. Bill Mollison, a co-creator of permaculture, his grandson works on permatexture and primarily does his work in Mexico because there's no zoning laws and there's no building codes. And so he's building homes that are completely new and radically different than our understanding of what buildings are currently. And he's doing it and giving away the buildings for free as humanitarian aid. And so that's care of future, care of people, care of the earth all at once. And I'm actually talking to him later today on my podcast, Permaculture Tonight, about that. And so there's permaculture being applied to, there's this thing called social permaculture. And I feel like that's part of permaculture, but people are creating their own branch of social permaculture because they feel that people are focusing too much on the garden with permaculture. And permaculture really needs to be applied to cities, needs to be applied to governments. There's this thing called holacracy, which applies ecosystemic behavior to people and social systems in business and government or any decision-making body. We have energy systems. All these different things are all applying permaculture. We talk about alternative energy. Sustainable energy is bogus. Those solar panels are made out of oil. All that plastic that went into that giant turbine, what's going to replace it? It's made out of oil. We're at this juncture where we got to like get over this, like really get over this oil thing. And there are answers. There's such a thing called a trompe. So it uses falling water, like let's say a mine shaft, falling water, then it goes horizontal and then passes out. So that falling water captures all this air. Put a bump in the bottom passage, captures all that air as it settles out. Pressurized air. It's compressed air that's permanently being generated. There was one of these that ran for 70 years in Canada and Ontario called the compressed air plant, or the air plant, ragged chutes. And so if you get permanent compressed air, there's no moving parts. No moving parts. So what can break? You know what I mean? So it's incredibly efficient. You're getting, and if you just use the compressed air and not transfer it to electricity, like go with an electrical turbine, get even more efficiency out of it. So we're just cracking the surface on what we used to do, because the trompe's actually old technology. Another old technology is the Stirling engine. Do you know that before the combustion engine, we created a hot air engine that worked? Yeah. Because you think about it, hot air goes up and expands. Cold air contracts and goes down. That's a turbine. And the thing is, we all go, oh yeah, when we hear it. Well, why haven't we heard it? Oh, because that information is being controlled, being concealed, being omitted. And that goes again to like, talking about how the government, like talk about prepping. You try to prep, in most places in America now, if you're close to a city, you will get in trouble if you start trying to prep and people can see it. So we're at this juncture where we need to step up. We need to say that this is what's right. We have to be self-reliant, and that's the honorable thing to do. Because what happens when things go really wrong and your children are starving? You get desperate and you do awful things. Everyone does, right? Your children are starving. You go into a completely different mode mentally, and that's where crime starts in these kind of situations. But if you have a food storage, it prevents crime. Food storage allows you to, if you have a lot, allows you to help people who would have done crimes. So we're at this juncture where we need to be crime preventers. We need to be the ones preparing our communities. The government's not going to do it. The government's investing in FEMA camps and guns. Like, yeah, they'll listen to us if we shoot enough people. It's like, no, that doesn't work. I mean, look at these countries where we're trying to manage the countries that way, in the Middle East and in Africa, just creating more war. What we need to do is teach these people in these foreign countries permaculture. And you know what? The Marines already have been doing that in Afghanistan. Have you seen the reports how Afghanistan had Marines were making their peacekeepers, and they're doing things like clean water, all this stuff, that was permaculture. So we need to just teach people how to fish instead of being like, dude, here's some fish, hold on to the fish, we'll be back in 5 minutes, you know? No. And then they fight over the fish, and then we come back and we're like, wait, we need our UN peacekeepers. And it's like, guys, you gave them one fish, there's 500 of them, and you told them not to fight and then left, right? It's like the story of like half the wars we've ever fought. So the whole thing is, if we teach people, our children, our enemies, ourselves, how to fish, how to grow food, how to generate our own electricity, how to capture our own water, how to clean that water, how to clean our gray water, our black water. I mean, we should know how to deal with our own crap. I can't even believe that we live in a world where we like claim that we understand and are captains of industry, and we can't even deal with our own waste. It's crazy. And all of our food, that our waste is supposed to be going back to feeding, because that's the loop, right? Every animal that feeds off something poops right there. And that poop is fertilizer with the seeds in it for the plant to keep going. But we've dislocated this, and now we're like, oh, we need to bring animals back to the farm so that we can have some manure. And everyone's like, no, you can't do that. And it's like, we need to bring back all the manure. The human manure too. But like, that's the thing, is it's like, it needs to be clean and safe. And in order to do that, we need to start creating protocols that acknowledge the principles behind the science. And people are like, I'm scared of poop. You're scared of poop because you don't know what's going on in it. You should be scared of poop until you know what's going on with it, and then you should respect it because it's dangerous, right? So it's like we're at this juncture where science has completely left the building. The government science is all bogus. The FDA caused mad cow disease. Go look up Joel Salatin talking about this. He and his father fought these idiots for decades, and then they caused it after they were saying they were going to cause it forever. So we're at this juncture where it is us, the preppers, the freedom preppers, the people who are like, freedom is self-reliance, independence did not come from dependence, independence came from being self-reliant, and only freedom comes from being independent and self-reliant. And that does mean we're part of an interdependent community, but that means my community doesn't pay for water, food, fuel outside of my community. You know what I mean? I may be the Apple guy, he may be the biodiesel guy, that's fine. But yeah, I mean, like, we're at that juncture, and I am so excited by programs like yours and your listeners and the people that you're engaging, because the change is going to come, and it's going to be because of people like you, people like us, and sadly, it's gonna hurt for a lot of people because they're going to be stuck in the cities, and not all the cities are going to transition. Some of them are, for sure, and some of the cities are going to be just fine. But it
Well, I think
requires.
it's kind of like back during the Great Depression, you know, a lot of people, especially up in those cities, they didn't know what to do with themselves. I'm from the South and I'm from the country. So, you know, I grew up in farming and gardening and what have you. So I feel like if there was a catastrophe like a Katrina that, you know, just where there was almost martial law or something, I feel like a lot of people, especially who grew up in the sticks like I did, are going to fare better than a lot of people in the city.
Well, you know, I grew up right outside New York City. I was blessed that I was able to be a ski racer, which is another costly kind of, you know, wealthy thing. But my dad was from Iowa, and so he was very, you know, like middle class, Midwestern about his values. So I just had this work ethic, and when I saw what was going on, I just applied it and started learning. But I didn't grow up like that. My mom had a garden, but I didn't grow up like that. I grew up among some of the educational elites. My brother was like really smart. He's a college professor now. My mom went to Columbia for her master's. My dad went to Cornell for his master's. My brother has a doctorate. I just grew up with all these like these people going places, I guess, or you could say. And now they're all these lawyers, hedge fund managers, all these people with all this wealth. And I have no interest in supporting and going about that the way they did. So that's why I'm doing it this way, and that's why I'm going back actually 2 generations. So it's like I got raised and bred to be part of the bankers, the lawyers, that whole white collar thing. And I became a teacher, which is sort of like a checkered collar kind of, because it's technically you're white collar, but you're not paid white collar.
Yeah.
uh, so that's what I did. And the thing is that none of those people are prepared for anything. For real though, none of those people are prepared for anything. The education they have is really just secret languages and patterns to deal with their little secret group, like lawyers. Oh, they're just lawyers speak lawyery, right? That is their secret language for their secret group that omits everyone else so that they can keep that value to themselves. In other words, it's worthless. Because if it was valuable, everyone would want it and we'd all be sharing it, like permaculture, like gardening, like our family values, right? So it's everything. The politics, the higher ends, a lot of sciences. They're all trying to exclude people, try to bar people out. And that kind of crap will only lead to worthlessness because they keep having to invent value rather than going to the principles, going to what's true, and sharing and creating value in your community. It's this reductionist thing where we're just boiling things down, boiling them down to each little piece and not seeing the holistic, the whole. And in order to do that, we need to get away from what we've done. I mean, look at the lawyer. They're like, shh, you can do only this. Oh, fix the toilet. Oh, I don't know how to do that. I'm a lawyer. Oh, shink. You know what I mean? It's all this like hyper focused, no skills. And so I came out of it being like, oh, I can write and communicate because that's what I like to do. And that's what I was English major for. But everyone else got all these skills and I didn't see any real value in it. And then when I learned permaculture and learned out the way the earth works, I realized all of them have nothing to do with the patterns of nature. None of them are regenerative. And so that whole track of success and that money track that they talk about is really consuming the earth. And all the money we talk about, the value, is actually liquidating nature and turning natural capital into fiscal capital. And I've talked about this a lot online, is the seed economy was the original economy, and that's actually tied to nature, and it's an exponential growth economy. Like we try to think about capitalism as exponential growth, it's just ridiculous. Capitalism is based on the liquidation of nature. The world owes like $100 trillion now in debt or something like that. Ridiculous. That's way probably wrong, but it's trillions of dollars of debt that we don't have. The earth does not have the natural capital to actually back that up. So the whole system of money doesn't make any sense at all when you look at it from that point of view. So what we need, yeah, keep going.
Sorry. No, I was just going to interrupt and ask you another question. So people who are contemplating maybe want to live a cleaner lifestyle, more sustainable lifestyle with permaculture, how do they go about doing that? What are your tips to them to get started?
Well, the first thing is to put in a garden. Well, all right. So there's like so many different angles. Obviously, we're here to talk about food. Another angle I would see before you start that, let's say you're in the city. You're like, oh, I only have a balcony. Or let's say you got just a lot and you don't have any money and it's just bulletproof. Well, in my mind, I'm like, well, I'm going to make soil first. And even with sites where I'm outside, I'm building soil with the plants that I plant first. So what's your cardboard and paper situation like? Oh, you put it in the trash. Why? Because that can be digested. It's wood lignin. It can be, mix it with your coffee grinds. So that's the nitrogen, the food that they need. And then you have your mushrooms digest that, like oyster mushrooms will digest that. And then that mushroom substrate that's left over, that can be digested by worms. And then what's left over is all that beautiful worm casting that everyone buys at the store. So you just took your paper, used mushrooms and worms to turn into worm castings for the garden or your balcony garden. Then, mixed with that paper, that inoculated paper with the worms, that's where all your kitchen scraps go. And then if you, for instance, have bones, you can bokashi compost those, and it smells like teriyaki sauce. It doesn't smell awful. You can literally disintegrate bone on your countertop, and so suddenly there's no stinky compost outside. Your worms are doing tons of the work for you instead of you turning your compost. And at the end of this, you have soil. Now take this soil and you can start growing things in it. And then in my gardening course that I'm coming out with in the next month, I talk a lot about this because you really have to rate things. So, for instance, if you've got a 10 by 10 space, you got to decide what you're going to put in there that's going to be the most valuable to your diet. And it's not like, and I mean, yeah, if you're just going for taste, put in the tomatoes, put in the, the fun things and all that. But if it's really about covering as much of your diet as possible, you have to figure out how much square footage you have, what are the top producers for your area, and how much you can create in that area given your time and energy levels. And then when you do that, and I take everyone through examples, and I take my own site's a great example, and a couple of other sites I also use as examples on how to do that. And it's pretty simple. I mean, I've been doing it trial and error for 8 years now, maybe a little bit longer. No, I think it's 8 years now. And so I've gotten to a really good place. I get hundreds of pounds of squash every year. That's one of my staples. I get gallons and gallons of grain seeds. And a lot of people are like, whoa, I don't grow grains because you have to clean them. It's like, yeah, why are you going with those grains? There's tons of grains. So there's grains that there's like hull-less oats, for instance, right? So where I would dive in is watch some of the videos I have online on the permaculturestudent.com, see what's possible, get excited. I've also got a YouTube channel. It's the Permaculture Student. I changed the name. The Permaculture Student on YouTube. And there's even more videos on there, and I'm daily adding videos too. And just see what's possible, because once you see what's possible, you can start combining and mixing, matching, because it's really a palette of colors that you can paint with. Gardening is not formulaic. You can develop formulas, but gardening really is improvisational. And that's why there's so many different methodologies and so many people saying, this is the way to do it, because there's so many different ways to do it. And a lot of those people are reflecting their areas, climate, and their specific orographic effects, and all this different stuff that they don't even notice because they don't know permaculture. So it's that kind of understanding that permaculture gives you so that you can apply it to your garden or your house or your roof.
Well, I've really enjoyed talking to you. You've been really informative. Is there anything else you think is worth mentioning about just the permaculture lifestyle?
Yeah, so it's a new and emergent science. So if you go online and start reading about it, you're going to find all sorts of things with that label permaculture on it. I tend, like with any emergent industry, it's like the Wild West, right? So it's like essential oils. I'm sure you know companies that you wouldn't use and companies that you would use, right?
Yes.
I urge everyone to look at the fruit and then look at the roots. So those are the two things that tell you the most about everything in this life. Look at the products and look at the principles. So feel free to go to the permaculturestudent.com and check out what I'm doing. I've got books. I've got videos. I've got courses. Got a lot of stuff there that people can check out and learn. I've actually got a free introduction to permaculture there. That's about an hour-long video on the permaculturestudent.com under the course. So there's that. That's probably where they should go.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely plug that and guide them in that direction. But thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I really enjoyed it, Matt.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you so much, Nikki, and I really appreciate it.
No problem. All right, well, take care and have a good weekend. I enjoyed it.
All right, you too. Bye.
Take care. Bye.